Hi, I'm Deriv'era and more PSP. So I did the second part of my game in a month. To do it so fast, I sacrificed some mental health and time of outdoors, so you could now bet will I go crazy before I fully release the game or after. But I'm really proud of what I made. If first part gave player time to accommodate to controls and game itself, second part is real action. I improved performance dramatically, so now I can spawn much more enemies, and second part is much more action packed. I stopped balancing the game into something easier than what I personally prefer. I balanced it in the way even I die here sometimes in late levels. Was it a good idea? Well, I want to enjoy my game too. So I believe in this decision and I should make difficulty selection one day. Something like easy mode. Also Steam page is almost online and you can wishlist the game there. Steam version will be released as PC port with PSP files, so it will be able to work on both Steam PC and PSP. Different executables that are using the same game content. I will probably be using my new Vulkan based engine I've been writing from time to time. I decided to go this way because I want Steam integration into the game. Link will be in the description, hopefully soon. If you wish to support my creations today, game is on itch.io in early access just for $3. I spent days polishing it, so my early access game works really well. Let's jump into some PSP technical details, our favorite part. From my previous game dev experience, first thing I did when I started the development is pre-calculation of sinus and cosinus, because it boosts performance. I get values from an array instead of calculating them each time. I did so even with square roots, but I had smaller range, so it rarely actually fit anything into it. I changed the range to up to 1800. It's approximately a square for 42 and below, something close to the distances used in the game. For performance, it's a nice thing to pre-calculate mass, because only in rare cases you need full precision, and even in modern games with many more entities in the game world, it still gives some boost. And the cherry on top is 8 and 2 function. This implementation is much faster than the full precision one that comes with PSP SDK or used in general. I found this one on Stack Overflow, a place of all developers. I'm not that good at math to approximate functions by myself. If you know math well, you basically can take an algorithm, express it as a formula and create a simpler one based on mathematical rules. That's how Carmack, for example, optimized square root calculation for original Doom. This implementation has an error of 1/5 of a degree, so it's still very precise. 8 and 2 is used in calculation of an angle between point A and B in 2D space. Think of it as a direction between 2 points. 8 and 2 is heavily utilized in games. In my code it is used for directing enemies at the player or sprite scaling to avoid rendering of the stuff that is not on the screen. GPU calls graphics as well, but it does it slower because it checks each polygon with more sophisticated algorithm. 8 and 2 is also used to direct sprites at camera, cause sprites is just a quad in 3D space, just two triangles, and it needs to be rotated towards the camera to look like a sprite. Second improvement is in shadows. I have a bad habit of not leaving to-dos and relying on my memory, so I've implemented shadows through alpha and forgot about it. I definitely thought it's a bad idea, but I wanted this thing just to work to make it better later, one day. To understand the problem, let's first discuss how blending and alpha work. GPU rasterizer takes each pixel on a polygon and calculates UV position on the texture for each of these pixels. If alpha mask is enabled, GPU checks alpha of this pixel. Since I'm using a pixel format that has only 1 bit per alpha, it's just 0 or 1. If it is 0, then GPU just skips the pixel. If alpha is 1, then it simply writes the color into the video memory. Sounds simple. So, how does the real transparency works, not a mask? When you have 8 bits per alpha or 256 values, in other words, this value determines the level of transparency of a pixel. First it loads the destination pixel from an address where a GPU is going to put the result. It's an additional memory operation, it already makes it slower than a mask. And here is a formula. Source here is data from texture, destination is data from a currently rendered frame. That's a proper transparency color mixing. And these two floating point multiplications are not fast. Because of this formula, old games rarely used real opacity. Old hardware, older than PSP, didn't even support it, and in software code it was too slow. Besides, full alpha depends on the order of polygons. You need to render them from back to front. That's why transparency for a long time was painful to implement in games. And it's still not the fastest thing. Even with ability to pack a lot of floating point calculators into modern GPU, other operations can use them as well. So faster your transparency calculations, faster your less demanding calculations in linear progression. Cause in good hardware architecture, such resources are shared as much as possible. But there is a workaround that has been used since ancient times, in the era of dinosaurs, and it's called addition and subtraction. That don't require multiplication in the basic formula. You just take the source and the destination color and add them together, or subtract. So you make a texture with black and white. Black will add no color because all color channels are set to 0, and white will add full color, and you can control which color this white will be by parameters in code, by controlling value of each color channel. Subtraction allows to implement fast, fake transparency. If you think that my shadows just worked with the right blending after this implementation, no. At some point, I've added gray fog to simulate smoke coming from the fires around the level. How it may be a problem? So, fog is being applied to the pixel before the blending operation. In other words, with gray fog, black pixels become gray and start to be visible. Circles turn into squares by the shape of the polygons. Fog basically ruins textures used for such blending operations. The only way to fix this I found is to turn off the fog for shadows. Blending setup function has pre-multiplier of color channels. I mentioned this before. So with pre-multiplier you can make a texture blacker. And that's what I do with shadows according to the distance from the camera. At some point textures become so black they add nothing, and that's what we want. Light under the fires works the same way, but uses color addition. These are the quirks of rendering pipeline without shaders. With modern graphics, fog will be a post-process effect, applied after the scene was rendered, so it won't have such problems. And PSP actually can do something like this even without shaders. You can take depth information, it looks like a texture, and just render it to simulate more complex fog, but of course it will have performance impact. Can't tell if there were any games using this approach. And don't get me wrong, PSP's rendering pipeline is actually very powerful for a pipeline, but it really requires experience of working with this hardware. Adding more enemies opened more funny bugs aside of optimization. My enemies started to squeeze each other through the walls. Collisions calculate the closest point to which you need to move a body to resolve the collisions, so at some point enemies started to push each other so far this closest point appeared to be on the other side of the wall. In modern collisions, when you simulate the world, you move a body in steps per frame. So bodies move and push each other in short steps and squeeze each other more or less correctly in tight spaces. So if you have 5 steps per frame, you will move all bodies for 0.2 of their speeds and check collisions on each step. Physics engines work in the same way, they just have much more complex calculations of different stuff, compared to general collisions that simply don't allow bodies to be inside each other. These steps also prevent fast objects to go through thin objects, but for PSP's performance it's a bit too much. So I did everything in one step and it worked well to this moment. So now I'm just checking it twice without moving the bodies in multiple steps. Just one step and then double check. With all the optimizations it works fine. I first build a collision pool at some distance from the player. This way I check only the stuff close to the player to save some performance, so collisions happen with limited amount of bodies. The following 2 collision checks for walls and bodies work with this collision pool. Another big performance improvement came to me in a bus stop. I mean real bus stop. I don't know why, but most ideas come to me there. I guess best stop gives time for self-reflection. Without it I will lose my creativity. When I hit enemies or they die, I have particles of blood. When particles are flying, they check the collisions with walls using raycasting at each frame. Raycasting is checking collisions with a short infinite line. So I thought, why I check all of them at the same frame? So I divided particles on 4 phases. Each frame I check only one phase, so I check all the particles in the length of 4 frames. Visually I didn't notice that something is off with this approach. Raycasting is heavy on calculations, so it had impact. For projectiles I also added 2 phases, only 2 because projectiles are more important and should be more precise. Also there are less of them than particles. By projectiles I mean things that fly and damage you and enemies, so the flamethrower now works better. All of these performance improvements are noticeable only on real PSP. Emulator gives so much performance to the game, you just don't notice performance flaws. I'm not even sure anyone besides me and my friend played the game on real PSP, so not many people will really notice the effort, but I want the game to work well on real hardware cause, well, it's a PSP game, not PSP emulator game. It was frustrating to have no button to reload the weapon. During the implementation of the first episode, I didn't come up with where to map it. I ran out of gamepad buttons. Randomly, during laying in a bus tube again, I came up with the following. 1 tap on a circle button reloads the weapon. Double tap drops it. I don't know why I didn't think about it before, but here we are. I played the game really a lot and this works well. And I really want to tell you about the second boss, but I don't want to give you spoilers. Here is a render I did for the game trailer. This enemy is one of the best characters I've created and you will never know all the details just by playing the game, and it's a bit sad. So I think to start making short videos to tell you about backstory and world building about some characters, maybe I will then compile all the information into long lore video. I've been creating this world for like 5 years or 7 or 9, I'm not entirely sure. On a scale of universe, not exactly this spaceship or this game or this situation, just races, history and why certain events happen. I'm using this world as a base for this game, so it's deeper than the presentation. People play such games not for the story but for shooting and gameplay. And all my focus is on shooting and gameplay and different mechanics around it. And in general, I'm not a fan of games that present story through text instead of other presentation tools like environment storytelling. I have hard times listening to real humans, not even saying about game characters. Also, I think not many people would be interested in yet another game lore. So write in comments, I'm really curious about that. Do you want to engage with lore or you just prefer the pure gameplay where the story just shallowly binds levels together? When it comes to boomer shooters, I think this question should be genre specific. I think that summary of events, characters and lore in a video format is easier to consume than the heavy game presentation. I can't play Cyberpunk for this specific reason. They don't allow me to play and just throw endless world building and tutorials. And the perfect game that just allowed me to play while having a rich story is first Silent Hill, with a lot of environment storytelling, one of my favorite games and the one that really being discussed and broken down on components and real game design classes. Must play for a game designer. In comparison, I couldn't comprehend the story of Silent Hill 2. It was much easier to watch it on YouTube. I think in SH2 it's worse. And a bit about revenue, because why not to share numbers? First, what I did for marketing. I kinda did nothing. I've posted on Blue Sky as the social media didn't bring anything, I'm not active there. But when you are active somewhere, there are people who read you and familiar with your existence. It helps you find a person or two who may buy your game. Not for revenue, of course, you need opinions and feedback. Sometimes I get them. My first YouTube video about PSP did terrible. I don't think this one will do better, but I like sharing my experience and there are people for whom it might be useful and interesting. I abandoned the idea to promote the game with long videos, something I initially bet on. I planned to release more videos during the development, but then just rushed into full-scale game making. You really need to give YouTube a lot of attention to make your channel grow, and I'm more a developer than YouTuber and I don't want to spend so much time on YouTube. Looks like the only way of promotion for me are shorts. At least that's how I see it at the moment. I've started to think about long videos more as vlogs, so I probably will take less effort in making them, because my rare video hits more than 10k views. It doesn't mean I will abandon my older projects like homebrew game consoles. I also promise to check out Dark Basic Professional and Blitz Basic and make small games using them. But current priorities are simply not there, and probably I will rethink the approach of making such videos to optimize the process to take less time. Also, Mr. Sujano, a YouTuber, mentioned my game in his gaming news. Big thanks to him. Check out his channel. And this actually gave traffic to itch.io page. He had around 10k plus views on his video. They converted into around 100 game page views, and well, I have 7 total sales at this very moment. And it's my fault that there are not more. I think the big downside is not having a trailer. I thought that the first episode is too small to make a trailer, it has not enough content. I should have uploaded at least gameplay footage instead. That's the lesson for the future, but I didn't expect someone mentioning the game without me promoting it to the YouTubers. Will trailer change anything? I don't know. I hope so, I'm making it nice. No miracles happened so far. You need to have really attractive game page. PSP is not enough to make people buy a game, and low price as well is not that attractive as you might think. There is even an evidence in some research papers, don't ask me to search for them, that people expect low-cost games to be bad just because of the price. So I've tested the idea about a game being promoted by the retro hardware itself, just by the fact, and I'm pretty sure that being just retro is not enough. I believe in the future PSP will actually help me promote the game because of this uniqueness. So retro hardware is a good point to get attention, but to make sales you need good screenshots and a trailer, and probably reviews. I'm really keen to finish the game soon, a bit of working on weekends and 50 hours working weeks, and it will be fully out. How do you think I made the second part in just a month? And this game will define my future, because if I won't sell enough to at least to support my life for half a year, I will return to doing less interesting stuff in more harsh environments, like I will need to really talk to people at some workplace, make myself smile when I don't want to, and be less critical of AI on LinkedIn and less annoying to people, stop attacking the CEO of Microsoft in comments. It will be a terrible outcome. I really dislike Satya Nadella as a CEO and all of this AI bullshit he pukes around. Some time ago, like 17 or 18 years back then, I wrote neural networks much before it became popular, to break, prove your human captchas and recognize objects in images, and now I feel disgust every time I hear or say the word AI. Still, I have an idea to create a video about making a language model neural network under DOS on my K6 300 MHz machine in ancient baby 80Ks. It's such a beauty. Basically another retro project I hope to do one day in a pile of my retro project ideas. Thanks for watching and good luck. See you soon.